And for those of you who are astute observers, you'll notice this presentation comes from the future. Also shows you just how ready I am to be done with this year. So thank you. This is my first ePIC conference. Really excited to be here. I know many of you in the room, so I'm really glad to kind of lean into this conversation. And the goal for this quick presentation is to really give you an orientation to who our organization is, what we're all about, and the various initiatives we're supporting to hopefully set up a dialogue with you all about, where are the points of connection with the open recognition community? What could we be doing more of to build those bridges? And I really want to kind of hear from you. But I first want to educate you all on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we can take it from there. But I'm hoping this becomes the first of many conversations and attendance at these events. Okay, so first of all, I want to point out that we are not the federal government. Common misconception. I actually work for two organizations. There's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Chamber Foundation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is the world's largest business federation. We represent over 1,500 state and local chambers of commerce and collectively reach over 3 million firms, the majority of which are small to mid-sized enterprises. The Chamber Foundation is what I'm representing today. That's our nonprofit affiliate, so it's not part of the membership organization. It's nonprofit, it's philanthropically driven, so we raise money from prominent philanthropies and then create programs and initiatives that are more field-facing. So the membership organization based in Washington, D.C. is primarily a lobbying organization for the federal government. But the foundation side of the house is we're working with companies all across the country, going to their communities and really trying to support them. And kind of what our competitive advantage is employer leadership. So being the world's largest business federation, and the U.S. is an unstructured labor market, so there is no kind of national federation of business outside of our own. There are many different sector associations. There are BRTs. We could talk about those differences. But part of the reason I went from state government to the U.S. Chamber was to actually have the ability to reach employers at some meaningful scale to enact change. Because for a lot of things, the more employers lead or lean in or participate meaningfully, it can help accelerate change and social impact. So that's what we're all about. And who I am at the Chamber Foundation is I'm affectionately referred to as the workforce guy. So I kind of oversee all our workforce programming. We also have a variety of education programming. It's more like an early childhood ed, K-12 education. But it's all workforce as far as I'm concerned. So if you want to talk workforce at the Chamber or Chamber Foundation, I'm your point of contact. And how we think about our work is, our theory of change is, employers have a unique lane to lead. It's not employers alone, but it's employers playing their role. And there's kind of three big buckets we're trying to close when it comes to developing a quality skills-based workforce development system. And we're trying to close gaps around employer partnerships. It's a very hard thing to do in the United States context, and we're really trying to come up with a variety of initiatives where employers aren't just an advisor at the table, but they are actually a partner in proactively designing solutions. So how do we do that? Not in a boutique way, but do it at scale across the country. So close partnership gaps, then close data gaps, which is what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about with you all today, because it's not just the partnership issue, which is a human problem, it's also a technology problem with how we're exchanging data, providing better information, using information. So I'm going to talk about how we're trying to close some of the data and technology gaps, but then there's also financing gaps, and that's going to be something I try to close with later because I think it's going to be kind of a provocative new idea to kind of put in front of a group like this. So there's partnership gaps, data gaps, and financing gaps that need to be addressed in order to create a competitive workforce development system. And then we have a variety of initiatives. You'll see their logos there on the right-hand side, which I'll briefly touch on each, but they're all trying to address different pieces of this. They rarely kind of fall within a single bucket, but I'm going to go through them in quick fashion so you get a sense of how we're trying to close these three gaps through our efforts. So here's another visual I've been playing with. If skills is the lens upon which you want to look at the world, it's certainly not the only way to look at it, but it's a way that resonates with a lot of folks in our networks. You could kind of organize each of these initiatives around addressing a different piece of the skills paradigm. So it's not about doing any one of these, it's about holistically engaging all of them. To have skills-based jobs, pathways, finance, demonstrations and assessments, records and hiring and outcomes. And again, oversimplification, but if we're looking for kind of quick cheat sheets to say, how does all this fit together? This is kind of a quick way to kind of associate each of these trying to address a different piece of this paradigm. And again, just to put a finer point on it, for a lot of the folks we work with in our network, there's usually an itch they need to scratch. and there's one door they want to come in to say, I need to solve that problem now. But then once they're in the door, they quickly realize there's all these other problems I'd like to solve too. And I want to start working in other initiatives as well to tie it all together. So this is synergistic by design to address each of these pieces, but often folks are trying to solve one or two of these first, but they eventually find out if I'm going to have a quality and competitive workforce system, I really need to have efforts that are touching upon each of these because they are all interdependent on one another. So it's not about doing any one of them well, but all of them. Now, I want to spend some time digging into one initiative in particular because I think it connects the most closely with the open recognition community, and that is the T3 Innovation Network. This name's come up a few times. There are several folks in this room who are members of the T3 network who have been engaging in their networks and projects. We have Phil Long here, who's also officially representing the T3 network at the conference, one of our lead consultants, but many of you have been involved in this work. Kelly Page is working on our new skills-based hiring and advancement toolkit. We'll get to that in a second. But wanted to share a little bit about what the T3 network is all about and how it connects to the open recognition community. So this was formed in 2018, and it was really focusing on data interoperability because we were working on data initiatives on the demand side, the employer side, and we wanted to have a conversation with education partners to say, this isn't about us solving these in a silo, but it's about talking about data interoperability across our various domains. So we thought we'd just put a quick paper out about data interoperability and why it's important, and it turned into a movement that continues today. So now we have probably over 2,000 professionals that are affiliated with the network. But a good way to think about the T3 Innovation Network is it's a collection of like 6 to 8 projects at any given point in time. And it's about engaging in collective action, looking at cross-domain issues. So where are we trying to exchange data across like employers, education, government, military, et cetera. And then we're trying to figure out where are there collective action problems where there's probably not a single company or product that's going to solve it, but it's going to take all of us coming together to say we need to come together to close some of these data and technology gaps. So that's kind of how the T3 network was positioned. And there's kind of 3 overarching goals. One is we really want to make all learning count, regardless of where that learning occurs, and that should be a direct hit with the open recognition community. So very much important to us and to the chamber, because we've got a lot of learning happening within our companies that more often than not goes completely undocumented and workers don't have access to. So we make it really hard for everyone. So we want to make all learning count. We want skills and competencies to function like currency. And what I mean by that is to not only make them transactionable, but translatable. So semantically, we may be speaking different languages, but we need to be able to live in a data and technology world where we can have our language, but effectively translate between our different domains to understand apples are talking about apples, oranges are talking about oranges. So, we don't think there's going to be the Esperanto of skills or competencies out there, so we're trying to figure out if we're using different learning outcome languages, different skill languages, different competency languages, how are we able to transact that data, but then also translate it effectively. So we're not trying to make everybody kind of fit into one language. And then we also want to make this the most important one, how are we empowering learners and workers with data? Often they're the ones who have the least access to that data and the least agency with it. And we're trying to flip that to say, how are we always making sure learners and workers are getting more and better access to data so they can address a wide variety of use cases that are important to them, such as applying for job or career advancement opportunities for continuing education, so on and so forth. So this is kind of our kind of true north that we always come back to is if we're engaging in a project, is it in service of this goal, these goals? And I should have put it on here, but I didn't. My kind of cliche tagline for T3 has always been, we're use case driven, meaning we're not chasing solutions in search of a problem, but we're focusing on the use case, not just waxing poetic about the technology, but what's the use case? So use case driven, standards based, because we think standards are a key part of interoperability, so we're always coming back to standards, and then vendor neutral. We're not trying to give any one competitive advantage in the market, but trying to approach this as an ecosystem where everyone can benefit from the solutions and projects that are being pursued. A lot of our work is based around LERs. I know this community kind of uses different language to describe them, but I kind of come up in the LER space. I was actually at the National Workforce Policy Advisory Board where the LER term was coined that we were a part of. But T3 is you'll see in any of our writing that comes out, we're all about learning and employment records, and we're also focusing on a variety of use cases, but primarily skills-based hiring as the main one because given we're cross-domain, that's what's top of mind, at least within the US context, is how are we using LERs to get this use case right, but it's not the only use case. But a lot that's being done in service of that use case could be used and appropriated for other things. So we need a place to start, and we've been focusing on LERs and the skills-based hiring use case. Here are some characteristics that we like to emphasize about them: that they're standards-based and machine actionable, they're vendor neutral and fully interoperable, content rich, they include verifiable claims and assertions. Again, another direct hit with this community, that we're empowering people with data and that they're accessible to all. And I'm going to come back to that accessible to all in just a little bit. We actually put out the first LER animation when we coined the term. Before that, folks had kind of moved, well, there was a specific set of folks that tried to push ILR, interoperable learning record, for those of you who remember that one, and they decided that's a disaster. So we came up with LER, and we put out an animation that's still good to this day. So if you want a quick little kind of 60-second description of what an LER is, that's available on YouTube, and there's a link for you. Now, we've been making a lot of contributions in T3 to this space, and I just wanted to focus your attention on a few of these things. So if you're curious about how the open recognition community can fit into T3, we have been doing work around storing and managing LERs. We developed one of the original digital wallet specifications. Sending and receiving LERs. We're doing work on the LER resume standard. So how can data elements from multiple LERs be packaged in a resume presentation that's machine actionable with an employer HR system? It's not that you're going to throw a bunch of LERs at an employer and they're going to be able to ingest that. They're not. So how are you organizing the information so it could be processed as a resume? So that was one of the gaps that were highlighted, and we're working on fixing that. Lots happening at data interoperability. You heard from the SURF presentation, talk of the DECIM tool. We're the ones who developed that. So we are supporting the DECIM tool, and we're going to be doing a variety of data standards mappings over the next 2 years. So if you have a mapping that should be prioritized, come talk to us. LER publishing and endorsements, link claim standards and a prototype publisher. I'm going to hold fire on this one because we have a session right after this, I believe in the other room, where Phil Long is going to be talking about what link claims are and how it's a novel take on endorsements and how we've been seeding that work with the support of the Gates Foundation. LERs for all, the Experience You project. This is something that's again going to be discussed, not in the session that follows, but the one right after that. Simone is going to be leading a panel discussion where Experience You is going to be discussed. But how do you actually go big and go fast with LERs, knowing that we can't just issue dozens at a time to a bunch of students that are in college or in like an Ivy League program? So how do we make LERs accessible to the entire workforce from day one, not focusing on the students that are already doing well, but focusing on populations like the unemployed? So how do we make it relevant to them? Toolkits. We're going to be putting out a skills-based hiring and LER toolkit early next year to support anyone that wants to do a pilot around using LERs with employers. And then we're doing a bunch of other work around supporting competency and skill frameworks. Right now, we have all of these frameworks. They're hard to find. They're hard to use. And we're trying to make that a little bit easier. So this is a little bit more complex. I won't go too much into it. But we're really trying to make it easy for folks to search a variety of frameworks quickly and easily to find what they need to actually do something with it, like describe a job. So that's the Competency Explorer. Happy to talk more about that, but we're really trying to make frameworks more usable by folks that are actually trying to get things done, like write a job description, write a curriculum, develop an assessment product, so on and so forth. So that's the T3 network, and that's probably the most relevant to this community right now, but I did want to quickly touch on a few other things that we're doing. We're not just focusing about better data about learning and learners, but we also have initiatives around better data about jobs and better data about employment. So if you're thinking holistically, someone could have a lot of structured and verifiable claims, but if those can't be compared to structured data about a job and we can't communicate about the employment outcomes associated with it, we're not getting it up, we're not fully there. So we have another tool we're developing to help employers create better structured data, better validated data about skills and competencies required for jobs. That's the job side tool. Happy to talk more about that after this. And we also have JetX, which is our kind of moonshot effort to help standardize data held by employers around jobs and employment records. So if we get this right, we'll know more about what's actually happening in the labor market around employment outcomes that we've ever known before. So this is a much longer presentation, but where it connects with LERs is if we're able to create a multi-state public-private data trust in the US that can help employers organize and share this data, what it could do is create a backbone infrastructure to create national employment records for everybody. So anybody can go to this data trust and say, I want my verified employment record and have that added to their digital wallet. It's the E and the LER, and that could be scaled. We're not talking about dozens of records, we're talking about tens of millions of records at that point. A couple other things I wanted to point out is our ePIC program. We have ePIC too. Our E is a big E though. And then we have our talent pipeline management initiative. These are important because ePIC is trying to scale project-based learning with employers. Imagine 100 business associations offering 1,000 innovation challenges, reaching over 10,000 learners every year. We're building that. We're starting it now, and we're going to credential it with badges. So any student that engages in this authentic project-based learning experience with employers, they will receive a verifiable credential in support of that. And we want to make that a known credential. Another thing in TPM is this is our talent supply chain work, probably what we're best known for. We're supporting employers in building talent supply chains all over the country. We have thousands of companies that are using this framework. So they organize as an end customer of a talent supply chain and not just as an advisor to a program or institution. And that's not to say people are widgets or schools or factories. It's to say once employers know what it means to engage with a preferred partner, preferred provider of talent, they understand, oh, this isn't about showing up and having an opinion. This is about getting really detailed specifications about my needs and engaging in continuous improvement, much like I would a supplier of anything else. So as we've been building this out, we're actually, for those that go through the TPM Academy, we are now providing them with digital badges. So we're recognizing TPM practitioners through the badge movement, but we're also hoping to now integrate a variety of credentials and call them badges, call them whatever you want, LERs, but we're going to try to get these talent supply chains to adopt these digital transformation tools. So students are coming in with those resources, and employers then know, again, we're not doing LERs or verifiable credentials for their own sake, but this now becomes a useful and practical tool for me to understand how somebody has actually met the qualifications for a job and done it in a trusted way, and I'm very confident about onboarding them into a position. So we're trying to create networks and infrastructure that doesn't currently exist, that's employer-led, and now we're at a point where we're finally starting to integrate some of these digital transformation tools, and there's just copious opportunity here, I think, for open recognition and what these employer networks are trying to do. I wanted to, before I leave with some kind of parting thoughts, conclude with talent finance, because this is one of our newest initiatives. It's really exploring alternative public-private finance for education and workforce development. For those of you who are familiar with the US system, you know we have a bit of a debt problem when it comes to how students pay for these experiences. But for us, the bigger issue is upskilling and reskilling with the incumbent workforce where there is no good financing mechanism. So lots of different efforts happening under talent finance, but one of the ideas that's recently emerged is this concept around skill savings accounts. And like, imagine for those of you who are familiar with healthcare savings accounts or flexible spending accounts, having a similar version for skills. So typically in our country, we have what we call Section 127 of the tax code, or they call 5250, which is your employer can help reimburse your tuition expenses up to $5,250, and it's not counted as income for tax purposes. We've had that since 1978. Hasn't changed very much. It was built for a very different problem, a very different workforce and economy, and we're saying we need to fundamentally change that. So now imagine if between the US and European context, we had 150 million workers with this debit style account with employers making direct contributions with an annual balance of $1,500, that would be a $225 billion marketplace, not debt, that's cash up front, where we could be selling on-demand upskilling and reskilling opportunities with the transcript of choice being an LER or VC. So not only are we trying to create employer networks that could adopt these digital transformation tools, but we're trying to create entirely new ways of financing the system that could create massive demand for a new type of credential that's out there. So my final two slides are going to talk about implications for worker empowerment and then questions for the ePIC community. One of the things that I really want to impress upon this group is we're trying to mass produce LERs and claims through artificial intelligence. Again, this is going to be in a conversation later today with, that Simone is hosting. So we're trying to figure out how do we support learners and workers at scale, and we think AI is a critical tool to do that, and we'll explain more in a bit. Link claims, I mentioned that's going to follow the session in the other room. Phil Long's going to lead that conversation, but we're talking about scaling and linking endorsements without the need for a large technical infrastructure. We're happy to expound on what that means, but technology adoption is an issue, and we think we can actually cut some corners with some innovation that's coming down the pike. We also want to make sure we're supporting data interoperability so no learners or workers are locked into an existing vendor platform or network, but we want to make sure their data can move seamlessly without loss of data or increase in costs, so we're trying to fight that battle. And then we're also, per the talent finance comment, trying to come up with new financing mechanisms so people actually have money, resources to pursue additional education and reskilling opportunities that results in a verifiable credential. And then my questions for you all is there anything the T3 network could be doing to support this community better than it's already doing? Are there opportunities within the skills-based hiring and advancement toolkit, the LER toolkit that we're deploying next year, that could connect to some of the resources in the open recognition community? In general, what can employers and business associations be doing better or more of to support the open recognition movement? And then are there opportunities to jointly pursue projects, events, and activities together, whether it's with the U.S. Chamber Foundation, with the T3 Innovation Network, makes no difference to us, but what could we be doing more of together? We're happy to lean into that conversation. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to go to the T3 Network Hub for that particular initiative, but you could also go to the U.S. Chamber Foundation website for information about all of our efforts. And last but not least, there's my contact information. Happy to make this deck available to the community, so don't feel like you had to remember anything. It's a lot of info. But this was just a quick orientation of who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and our extending a hand saying, is there anything we could be doing more with you? So we're deploying our time and resources in a way that's moving the field forward. So thank you, Don, and thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Jason. That's amazing. To pack so much in such a short amount of time. We do have about 5 minutes for some interaction, so if you wanted to flip back maybe to those questions for the community and or questions for Jason. Does anybody have a question or comment?
Thank you. That was a dizzying amount of things that are happening, so that was really good to know about. I'm just curious, of all those initiatives, which one's having the most impact that you're seeing, and how is impact being measured?
Yeah, I'd say it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. I know that probably if you were to ask other folks inside the chamber, they would probably point to talent pipeline management, our talent supply chain work, because that has really fundamentally changed how a lot of employers are partnering with education and workforce partners. And they're just having amazing stories come out, and they're doing it in all kinds of creative ways. So, for example, we had a utility company that was posting about 100 skilled positions and getting over 4,000 applicants, and fewer than 50 of the 4,000 were qualified. They adopted the framework. They identified 4 preferred providers. They implemented the process we provided them. They then posted 100 jobs. They got 100 highly qualified job applicants. They saved $30,000 per hire through reduced onboarding and training, and then moved up their poor retention to 98% retention. So our community gets really excited about that because they see massive efficiencies in how they're partnering. It just makes good business sense. And then while saving money is good for our community, we also have some really creative efforts happening where in Kentucky, for example, they have implemented a talent supply chain with prisons. So as folks are coming out of the prison network, they're already getting exposure to jobs in the equine industry, which is working with horses. And they have some incredible stories that have already been published around how a lot of these folks are coming out of prison into these farms and actually having a really good experience with it. So lots more stories, but I know our folks would kind of come back to say, that's changing lives in a real tangible way. Now we're just going to figure out how to pull all these cool data and technology resources into those stories.
Hi. So for people that are in training and credentialing, one of the things that comes up is employers are afraid that if they pay for these things for employees, the employees are going to leave them. And this is a huge, huge obstacle. I'm wondering if for instance, I appreciate the healthcare spending account analogy, but what about employers actually paying for some of these things? Because the data shows people stay when we provide them with these opportunities, as you know.
Yeah, so one of the approaches I've liked being at the chamber is we're coming from a trusted place. So it's one thing for an organization to come in and say, this is what employers should be doing. For us to come in and say, hey, family, this is why we should be thinking about this differently. This is a win-win situation. They're more apt to listen. And the skill savings account example, I think, is a good one because for a lot of companies, they don't offer a tuition reimbursement program. They just don't think it applies. They don't understand how to use it. It could be cumbersome and it could be expensive to put out $5,000 per employee, $5,000 or more per employee And often the people who are benefiting the most are the people who need it the least. They're folks that already have degrees. So, but coming in and saying, look, it's not about reimbursing $5,200. It's about providing $200, $500, $750. Then they start perking up and saying, oh, I could do something like that. Under the other regime, I could not. But this seems like something that's actually better designed to fit what I can do as a mid-sized enterprise, as opposed to offering, a program that's been around since 1978, that's really benefited the larger companies. So there's no easy answer to it, but I think coming from a trusted place and showing them how these types of activities and extra work and extra investment actually leads to better outcomes. And with like TPM, we can show it. It's hard when you're doing something brand new because you're like, it's theoretical. But once we got over that hump, we now have hundreds and hundreds of really good stories to say, look, I could tell you theoretically how a talent supply chain works. Now let me show you 5 stories that happen in your industry where companies have got amazing results. And those real examples tend to win a lot of companies over, and especially if they're hearing from their peers in their industry networks saying, okay, well, if they did it and got good outcomes, why aren't we doing it? So kind of building that peer competition could be a really good thing in the business community, because when they see their industry trending a certain way, it's like a domino effect. So we try to set those domino effects up as best we can. But no easy answer, and especially in the US, it's a very heterogeneous market. So it takes thousands of conversations to move the needle.
Thank you, Jason. I'm afraid we've come to 11 a.m. It was a really great session overall. Thanks very much to Jason, very much to Noah. Thank you.